Thank you, Wendell. I've got a long name here, title for the presentation, but the main point is collaboration, because the strength of decision-making when you've got many minds is a lot better than my pea-sized brain. So luckily I married a wife that's a lot smarter than me, and it works better that way. Again, fourth generation rancher, that has good things and bad things. My memory of growing up was every morning the discussion of what's happening with the kite hawks and all the wildlife around the ranch, and then what's making the grass grow, what's not. And it's that whole interconnection with the environment around you that I really feel and most ranchers all feel we're blessed with. Being the out of college, I thought the first thing I needed to do was Marie and I needed to buy a ranch, and we certainly did. Things didn't work out real well. It was a very interesting experience, gave me lots of practical experience, but sustainability, as one 72-year-old rancher told me, means either Ma or me getting a job in town. And so I became a farm advisor with the University of California, first in Lassen County for 17 years, and then the remaining of my 32 years down in Sutter, Yuba, and Butte counties. But when I was in Lassen County, I was able to participate in a process of a multidisciplinary team with Eagle Lake trout. It really taught me a lot about how the power of bringing in lots of expertise can make better decisions. And as Wendell said, we traded our portion of a family ranch for a ranch up in Modoc County. And you can see it's up in the northeastern corner, and Canby's about almost dead smack in the center, but not quite. That gives you a location. Certainly a beautiful ranch location as far as aesthetics, has deep, high, rich soils in the valley. And for once in my life, we were on the head of the water system, not at the bottom. And any of you ranchers know that sure is a lot better, because being at the bottom, you're at the good graces of everybody above you. So that worked out well. A few challenges. The joke was we bought the Grand Canyon. I even took a rancher up there, and he looked at me and said, "I think you'd be nuts if you bought this." But Marie and I went forward and we did buy it. And, but we realized we had some things we really needed to fix there on the ranch property. So we started with our restoration plan, and that was to have a ranch that provided habitat for wildlife and resilient grazing pastures. In our mind, we wanted to have income streams from more than just cows. And so there was, of course, the Modoc sucker at the time was a listed endangered species. Much of the work by U.S. Fish and Wildlife and others with ranchers has now gotten it off. One of the first things coming off the list, but red band trout is a native trout. And there's certainly waterfowl, deer, and other things. Main thing we wanted to do is change the pastures from set stocking to some sort of intensive grazing, but that did increase the water demand in each one of those fields over the previous system where they'd had them set stock. And the whole idea was to use 4.5 miles of riparian fencing to try and make some changes. Confirm whether I was really nuts and we were writing this, we brought in a lot of other people. And again, that multidisciplinary team, cooperative extension course, called in my debts from all the friends and associates with cooperative extension. NRCS was a key player. U.S. Fish and Wildlife, we had several of their specialists that came in and helped. And California, and I keep saying Fish and Game, but Fish and Wildlife. And I decided if everybody thought the regulatory board was going to eat me, maybe I ought to bring them in and see what kind of bite they take. So we invited the board in, or one of the staff members in. And Point Blue has come in later in the process, but has played a very valuable part. And our resource conservation district up there, I'm going to tell you several times, but this work wouldn't have happened without them. So key player. So why do I think multidisciplinary teams are important? Because of the different expertise you get. I think I know enough about fish to be dangerous. Always the joke is, well, there's a red-tailed hawk. And then I get educated on what kind of a hawk that red-tailed hawk is and other things. And if you want to find out, I may be able to tell you what I think I want for cows, but how do I make that work for other species so we have that richness and diversity for other things? Here's the big thing I found. You get out on the ground and you build trust and you build relationships because you vision together out on the ground and you talk about things. And I can't stress how powerful over the 40 years of my being out crawling around with people, how important it is to get out on the ground to solve problems, because that sharing can make a big difference. Then the other thing was people were always bringing in new techniques and approaches that I myself certainly wouldn't have thought of, and maybe even the team didn't. And the other thing is you optimize solutions. Maybe you think the fence should be here, but as we saw in Damien's talk, maybe the fence should be somewhere else, or maybe we shouldn't even try a fence. Maybe we should try something else, as we saw yesterday with other techniques. And the key also was Marie and I got a large amount of assistance and so did the RCD in addressing the permitting process, which, as you saw with some of the discussions earlier, can be formidable. And along with that, once everybody got comfortable that we were on the right path, then U.S. Partners Program Fish and Game had a special grant from when they had the Mount Shasta accident called Conterra Fund, Conservation Board, and Fish and Wildlife Foundation. Those funds followed to help us. So we started photo monitoring. When I was a farm advisor, we ran around telling ranchers they ought to take pictures. So by golly, dadgummit, I should follow my own advice. And so I ran around then with a camera. Now I do it with a phone, and started photo monitoring things around the ranch. Then we changed grazing practices. Then we partnered with the Resource Conservation District, which was a real key, bringing them in, and started writing grants, managing grants, continued the photo monitoring. Now, this is the first project we'll talk about that we did on the ranch. Pretty expensive, and after seeing the low tech, you're gonna see I'm gonna try and tell you, we spent a lot of money here, and I really appreciate what Joe and Damien have talked about. And I think that's our long-term solution, isn't these grandiose projects. It's probably more simple stuff that we didn't do. But this is Dobie Swale Creek, was 1.5 miles on our property, but there was about 1,100 acres that were out here. And guess where as Joe said earlier, guess where the cows spent all their time? Right in here. And so, and the other challenge here is, as you'll see, there's 91 feet of elevational drop in that 1.5 miles. So as we'll talk about structures and their ability to do things, that's an important key to remember. So we did get funding, and the first thing we did was put in this fence, 1.5 miles of fence, to isolate this 80 acres off from the other 1,100. The next thing we did is Fish and Wildlife and California, I keep calling them Department of Fish and Game, but they're now Fish and Wildlife, came in, and we did both fish monitoring, and then we established temperature monitoring prior to doing any changes along the stream. Marie and I decided to go to intensive grazing, where we would graze only in May, or might go into late June with high numbers for a week or 10 days. And then the animals were, the key is they were off the rest of the year. The next thing we did was a large amount of restoration work, dirt work, and expensive dirt work. And over in 2006 and 2007, we've been planting woody species since 2007 and continue. When we got to the ranch, there was only about 4 willow plants. So we had quite a challenge. And we're, of course, went and got diversity so we wouldn't have a disease problem. We don't just plant from those 4 ones. Then thanks to Point Blue coming in and enlightening us on beavers and BDAs, we started that process in 2018. Wanted to go up and to Utah State. Joe had workshops at but never could quite make it. So maybe sounds like he's going to have some virtual. It's not as good as hands-on, but hey, it's a lot shorter than driving to Logan. So here's the three, we decided to put in three different types of structures. First, these are called HESCO baskets. During the Iraq War, they would drop these in the desert. They went together very fast. They'd fill them full of sand. They'd stack them 6 high, and they could withstand an RPG hitting them, and they could land helicopters inside. After the Iraq War ended, this company had a lot of these left over and was looking for something to do. As you can see, they have their fast gabions that you can quickly put together with geotech fabric, and they actually just have a spool that you put together here and connect them together. And you actually can then stack, fill them either full of dirt or rock, stack another series on top of them. As you can see here, this is 2 stacks. And then you can fill them with rock, or as you see here, dirt. I'll give you the short story here. They're not very pretty to look at, let's face it. And wherever we use them and more than 1 high, we had a little more maintenance work. Where we used them 3 high, they wanted to tip over. So if you're going to use them, they're great short. They're faster than putting together a gabion, so they save you time, but they are a little more expensive. I still think a beaver can do a lot better job now that I've gotten enlightened. This was the other one. I mean, we've got juniper encroachment going on down in the riparian area because it's dried out specifically. So why not put them to work? The local inmate crews were brought in for a falling practice before fire season to teach them how to fall. They skinned them out and built them on land, put them in place. Rock was put in each area there below it. And those actually turned out very, very low maintenance, not much to do on those. And they were very resilient. And I actually put in some more on our own. Marie and I did on our own. Then here's your traditional rock structure. As I told you, we had 90 feet of fall in that 1.5 miles, and we didn't have enough funding to put those on every foot contour. In fact, some of them were on 10 feet of elevational difference, and that caused many of them to fail in this project. But here's the proof in the pudding. Here's the Adobe Swale Grand Canyon. This was about almost 20 feet deep, head cut. And after putting in the structures, you can see how the system's responding by reconnecting the hydrology. Again, this structure dropped a little bit, and we lost 2.5 feet of this because it was a rock drop. But still, I'll show you how we're, thanks to Joe and others, how we're addressing that. This is a before and after. This is when we bought the place. This is where it was in 18. Now you'll notice the other friend we've got going on here, because of the grazing, we've got cattails, spike rush, and other things starting to come in here. We're just happy to be out of bare soil the first couple years. And the grazing plays an important role in that. We try and graze and get in to hit it and decrease amount of annuals going to seed, and then get out and let the perennials grow. We did plant perennials in here, but successive years of drought while we planted them was tough. So you'll see we're still fighting mustard and prickly lettuce, but eventually we're going to go back and seed. But we're waiting for the riparian to build back up, and let's get it back to a meadow. This is, again, where when we bought it, the wild roses, without us planting, came in on their own thanks to the grazing, and there are some small structures here. And so this isn't as resilient as the next project I'll show you, but still pretty good. Again, here's those rock drop structures. And now I'm finding out from Joe that my linear approach maybe wasn't the best, and Damien's saying the same. So maybe, but working with Point Blue and through NRCS CSP funding, we started making some what we thought were beaver analogs, and we're going to, once these grow a little more, we're then going to stack, weave in like others do, and start making a home for beavers. This area has a lot of mountain lions, and every beaver that's gone up there has disappeared. So probably we need to get deeper water to give them a better chance of staying alive in that system. But you can see all the silt that we're stacking up even in front of this structure before it failed a little bit. This one wasn't as bad, but the same thing. We put BDAs in there. So I'm heartened, I think, by Joe's work, and now Damien's showing it on Doty Creek. I think there's a lot to be said about using these analogs, and I appreciate Point Blue bringing that to our ranch. I enjoy every time they come because I always learn something. This is kind of the testament to the multidiscipline approach and everybody being involved in this, and thanks to a lot of people to make it happen. This is Bridge Creek, which is lower down and much less, where we only had about less than 19 feet of fall in this area. And we tried first, let's try intensive grazing. And you'll see by the pictures, we got a little effect. Maybe I was impatient, but then we went in with riparian fencing, and you can see the riparian area right here in the center that we fenced off and managed separately from the rest of the pastures. That required us to develop offsite water, which thanks to NRCS EQIP program, we were able to do and not have additional costs to the ranch operation. We put in 13 rock drop structures funded by a Cantera grant through Fish and Game. I'll call them Fish and Game. It's Fish and Wildlife, California, in 2003. We've been planting woody species in there. Point Blue came in and said, you're doing a great job of willows. Could you try some aspen or some taller species so we can get a little more diversity to bird population? So that's been our thrust. And Point Blue's been kind of giving me some better instructions on how to do that propagation, as I was inappropriately doing it. Then Point Blue came in and did some bird surveys, and that's important in that NRCS was helping us, and I think we need to show the public the kinds of things that those investments are doing for the public benefit. And so we're hopeful that over time we can show what that has done. Then Shazam, I don't know how they got there, but beaver appeared, and I saw all of you in the chat box saying, it's don't ask me, they just showed up. So this is 99, the year before we took it over. This is when we took it over. And if you see that's some bare soil here after a season of intensive grazing, this is both fall pictures. That's why it looks dry in a meadow. That is, we're getting some grass moving in there, but being impatient, we put a 3-wire high tensile fence in here. And then we started with rock armoring the channel and putting in 13 structures. This is in 2009, the day we removed the cattle. My cattleman neighbor came through that day, and he was aghast what we'd done to it. And I encouraged him to come back later. My point being is that, you know, with intensive grazing, the day after you move the cows probably isn't a good time to bring your neighbors over and show off the property. But here's the proof in the pudding, and here's why you take a picture. I don't even remember it being this bad, but that's what it was in 2002 prior to the project. This is 2008. And so we had a standard or a goal. We were trying to get bare soil covered, and we were hoping we'd get down to 5%. By 2008, we had 100%, and it's hard to see the willows there, but this is Teresa Bacchetti, when she was a graduate student, was working on riparian friendly grazing and started these transects you see here. And here's Teresa's post out here. She's come back and monitored it since, but a world of difference, thanks to 13 structures, grazing, planting, and a lot of people putting effort into the ranch. This is the bottom where you see the bottom of that drainage or field, and that's where you see the same thing. First 8 years, we got very good revegetation, and this is without planting anything as far as herbaceous vegetation. That all came in by itself. We did plant these willows. You can't, in the fall, you can't see them there, but I took this is last fall before leaf drop. So this is 2002. This is current. So really, when you get down in these meadows, it's much better than Dobie swale. We're down on a flat plain and a big meadow, and it's really fun to see these things respond. And now the beavers, because some of the head cuts were 10 feet deep, regulations wouldn't let us build a rock drop structure over 10 feet. So guess who's engineering them to go above 10 feet now? The beavers have come in and established themselves on the rock drop structures, and we're getting really good connectivity with the meadow, and that's a real good saving on irrigation. In the spring, these fields are already got a nice wet underneath, and it's easier. We're taking less water for us to irrigate those meadows. Again, all these projects wouldn't be happen without help. Here we even got our Partners people put up a sign. We appreciate everything that Partners does. If you haven't got them involved, it's worthwhile. We started out with Dan Strait coming up all the way from Sacramento. And now we work with the local wildlife area. And Steve and his crew have been really good to work with and very helpful. And they did the environmental review. I need to give that. That was the key, because the Modoc RCD didn't have quite the ability to do it. And Partners already had the standards and everything developed, so it really streamlined the process. Then Fish and Game did the fish study. We electroshocked before, and I appreciate that. And then the RCD did fiscal management, project management, and monitoring. So very helpful. And Point Blue, I always appreciate, because like I say, whether it's Wendell, Tiffany, or Bree, every time they're out there, have you ever thought about this? Have you and Marie thought about, no, we haven't. So that's really good. So again, the restoration wouldn't happen without all these agencies and NGOs helping us. This is one other one I'll show you, and this is really thanks to NRCS and other things. This is a wetland we own out on what's called the Devil's Garden, and it's appropriately named because it's nothing but rocks. And this is the Jack Swamp when it's full of water, because it's a swamp. And a miracle of miracles, when you drain it, you have cow feed. Never seen anything like that in my life. So the spring flow provides about 1,800 to 2,500 gallons a minute, which we store in that swamp for 1,000 acre feet, which irrigates the ranch below. But when it recedes, we get spike rush, elio spike rush growing that makes pretty good cow feed. Ducks Unlimited came in. We tried to high tensile fence across it as a brain idea in several locations. That didn't work out so well. We had one here, and the idea was to try and get duck nesting preserved, but we just went to deferring till after July to do our grazing. And then we fenced off the spring area that hadn't been fenced off up here, because it's the lifeblood of the ranch, and really tried to protect that. Here's the thing that you hear about the importance of generations. We hadn't been on this property, fourth generation rancher, but not on this property. And you learn a little late. We missed the cues, and 3 years of drought. We needed to rest it for 3 years from grazing. Thanks to the process of being involved with CSP, with NRCS, we had the financial wherewithal to do that. And then Point Blue and US Fish and Wildlife have done baseline bird counts for us, so we have that information. This is what Jack Swamp looks like in the summer. It's a beautiful place. You can go up and there's no sound other than the birds, and it's just wonderful. This is what, over the years, this is when we took it over, and this is 2018, 3 years of not grazing, and you can see the reduction in bare soil and the response we got from the system, and it's wonderful and enheartening. Here, this is us reacting too late, because we're first generation ranchers on this property, and it was mainly, it went to Forbes because of the drought and our management. So we rectified that by not grazing for 3 years, fencing off the wild horses, and Shazam, as I was told by other ranchers, this would be what happened, and they were correct. Same thing around the spring area, fenced it off, and you can see the response of just getting that area where cattle congregated to water and changing how cows graze made a great difference. So I just want to say that we've been active in the CRP program since it started. It's helped us address environmental issues, livestock water. We even have bird boxes now, more fencing for better management, juniper management because we have an encroachment, and even the weeds that we have, which are constantly coming on the property. We didn't have any Medusa head on this ranch when we bought it, and an invasion has occurred. I thought it was all over with, but apparently I was wrong. So these are the kinds of things we've been doing through CSP, armoring these areas. Since we do intensive grazing, you can see that we have from either side of the creek, we can use this area, and we've just armored it so we protect the water quality and also allow the animals some water. But we've developed a lot of off-site water areas, and then through CSP have put in wildlife escape ramps in all the watering systems that we put in. And a beautiful bird is on our property called a mountain bluebird, and it's just a wonderful bright blue. And these boxes, the starlings have pretty well taken over a lot of the nesting areas in the juniper. And so providing these smaller hole boxes gives the mountain bluebirds a chance. Here's the one thing we learned, the CSP project, we were putting up 3-wire high tensile electric fences. You can see we're getting just as good a response with 1 wire, and we don't have the deer tearing up the fence during the winter, getting caught up in this 1 wire that we did in 3, and we're still being effective at changing the system. With that, I want to thank everybody. I'll certainly, if there's time, Wendell, I'll take questions, but otherwise we can keep moving ahead and I can answer them in the chat box.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Yeah, I think we've got time for a question or two. Check the chat first. There's a question for you from Matt Hammond, Glenn.
Yes.
So the response of your rangeland and habitat is incredible. Has the productivity of your cattle operation responded accordingly?
Yes, it has. We're actually on some of those areas, we're getting more AUMs off of those areas now than we did before. And that's even with excluding the areas that we're only intensively grazing seasonally. And again, those we go in once a year, clean it down and go out, but it hasn't decreased, it's actually increased. I think the beaver are going to even increase that more once they keep moving that water hydrology up and re-wetting the meadow.
Very good. Any other quick questions before we move on? Here's another one. What were the results of the fish monitoring? Have the red band recovered? And did it require stocking or was it passive?
Yes, that's been the slowest response thing we've had. We had Boone and Crockett size speckled dace was all we got in the fish surveys. There were no Modoc sucker on the property and no red band trout. Unfortunately, the previous owner of the ranch put bass in the system, and there's the big challenge of how we address the bass, plus several successive droughts where it was questionable whether we should be taking trout out of any system that is under duress and reestablishing them. So that has been the very only disappointing part of the process. In the 20 years we've owned the ranch, we thought we were going to go Shazam and drop them in, but we're hoping to have 3 fish introduced, and that'd be native fishes introduced. So that's still our goal. Just got to keep working on it. But hopefully with lots of good help from agencies and NCOs, we'll get it done.
Thank you very much, Glenn.